the Amazing Women Speak podcast, inspiring and motivating every Black woman to own, honor, and execute her amazing, individually and collectively, as it was established at birth.
Good evening, and happy Sunday. I'm Crystal L. Gunn, and welcome to another episode of Amazing Women Speak. So while you are getting settled in for the show, hit the share button, please, and share Amazing Women Speak so your friends and followers can get in on this conversation. So April is Stress Awareness Month. So no time to waste. Let's just get right to today's topic, which is my mental health is my business. Michele, as always, thank you so much for saying yes to Amazing Women Speak. Thank you for being my BFF. And thank you for sharing your amazing with the world as you curate the most dynamic conversations.
Good evening. As always, no place I'd rather be on a Sunday than sitting in this space with my BFF, where we have another amazing conversation on deck, a conversation that we cannot have. Well, I take that back because we have had it with just the two of us because you are dope. And the platform really is around allowing other women to come in and share their stories and educate us from the spaces in which they come. And tonight will be no different. So let's not waste any time because, as you know, this is the fastest hour of our day. So without further ado, Stacey, come on in and introduce yourself.
Good evening. Hello, amazing women. How are you today? Hi, my name is Stacey Williams, and I get to spend this hour with two amazing women on this Amazing Women Network. How are y'all doing, everybody?
Great. Thank you, Stacey, for joining us for the third consecutive year where we have this really important conversation.
Goodness.
So whatever platform you are joining us from, we invite you to become a part of this conversation. Drop your questions, drop your stories, drop your concerns in the chat, and make yourself a part of tonight's conversation. One that we invite Stacey to come back every year because it is something that we don't talk about enough. My mental health is my business. One, either we're ignoring it. Two, we're leaving it in the hands of others. Or three, we're not paying attention to the things that don't get, if they're not diagnosed, we don't consider them a part of our mental health. And so we thank you, Stacey, for coming back one more time to challenge us to pay attention to our mental health. And like I say every week,
thank you.
Fastest hour of the day. We don't walk in the shallow waters because we just don't have time. We've got to get deep. We got to get deep this thing. And so in the 3 years you've been having this conversation, Stacey, what's one of the main reasons that we have to keep having it, that the needle's not moving enough, that we aren't able to shift and even slight a different direction as we think about our mental health?
So one of the things I notice is because mental health is not visibly observed, like physical health, it truly gets ignored. Then we have where you have a group of the mass that have owned what that looks like and tell us what it looks like. And we've kind of like adopted that. So we have all these different pieces going because like I said before, if you were in a wheelchair, it's visible that she is not able to walk or she's injured and we should help her. Maybe we should help her. Maybe we should ask if she needs help. But when a person is struggling with whether it's stress management or having those like mental pressure, that's not as visible. We, the individual, can mask it as much. And then it's not as visible to anybody else. And then we use language like they're just crazy. Oh, girl, that's just her. Oh, she's just doing the most. She's seeking attention. So we have all those things that makes it challenging to really, truly have the constant conversation, or even for us to really be able to say, I need help, or I need a break, or help me, or what's going on. Can somebody help me? Does anybody know how to help me? So, yeah. That's why we need to keep having these conversations.
So as you were given that list, Stacey, it really made the hair on my arm stand up, because I think about the ways in which I've even been guilty of putting that on myself, right? Because we normalize going through things so much that, oh, I'm
Yes,
just going through, I'll be all right? Like, even doing that to ourselves, I don't even have to make room for my girlfriends, friends, people that are around me to talk about, oh, that's just her. I do it to myself. And,
absolutely.
right? Like, so when we layer these things on, what society has to say, what our circles has to say, what we have to say, right, about ourselves. Talk to us about, how do we begin to identify, right, that this isn't something I'm just going through. This is something that I need to start figuring out, who do I talk to begin to unpack whatever this thing is.
For sure. When you realize that it's starting to get in the way of your daily function, then you've reached beyond the stage of, I need to ask somebody. So, for example, if you're finding it more and more difficult because of stress to get up, to do just basic tasks, even thinking becomes so difficult, making a decision, functioning in public, interacting with people, interacting even with yourself, crying all the time, just constantly in this uncomfortable, deep, uncomfortable state or space. That's really beyond the point of breaking, because anything that interrupts your ability to function every single day needs attention.
Yeah.
Right. So and again, I use the simultaneous conversation about our physical health, because people can get that. Right. So if you're constantly constipated, or you're vomiting all the time, or you're not able to just make it to the bathroom because of the excessive way in which your body is reacting, you would go to the doctor. There's no doubt about that. If I ask a room full of people, they would say, yeah, I would call 911. I will go to the doctor because I've been throwing up 3 days in a row. But when it comes to the other side of who we are, which is our mental states, we tend to minimize that.
Yeah. Which some of those things, right? Oh, go ahead, Crystal.
So, because you listed from, I don't know, not so intense to more intense. So what about, someone's not, they can get out of bed, they're still functioning, but they've been surviving and doing a thing. So now that's their normal routine. So when is it that okay, well, wait, yeah, I've been doing this. It's not extreme yet. So it's not totally disrupting my day, but it's stressful, because we know that stress is that, again, silent killer type of thing. But in the beginning, how do we know and recognize when, okay, this isn't totally disrupting my day yet, but if I stay on this path, it could.
Yes. Yeah. So it's that intermittent state of just like discomfort. And again, it's subtle, right? So one day you're okay, and the next day, just this day was just a little hard. Or you have parts of the day where it was hard, but you really didn't know what to do or how to do. Or you felt like doing the right thing or taking a break would be too hard for you to do. Like you have like this sense of guilt around it. So you could be at work and you're working all day. There's a lot of pressure at work. You have an 8-hour day. There's so much pressure in the work. You feel so bad of taking a lunch break. And so eventually over time, that kind of like becomes the norm, where you just work through the day. You don't take a break. You don't eat. You don't stop to say, I'm gonna go outside and just sit out for a little bit. It's getting nice. And then you leave from that and you go home and you start doing work with the kids, the home front, and then you do it all over again. That becomes normal, right? Like a normal routine. Oh, I just don't take lunch break. I just kind of do my thing. But eventually it will start to show up either in shoulder pain, back pain, headaches, being extremely tired, irritable, not even able to get along with people. That can become normal, right? Because now people say, oh, she's moody, just leave her alone. Well, what we have building here is this stress mountain that you go from there to when everything just falls apart. So it starts very small and it starts very subtle. And it starts where things become hard to do, but you're like, it's not a big deal. Kind of ignore it. Before you know, you built a pattern around living a stressful life. That can become normal. But again, as we know, stress silently and gradually takes you out. So that without being identified, you have to be able to identify it. But without being identified, it can continue and continue and continue. Whereas even if a person is really aware of that, they can address it quickly. Like, okay, I noticed my pattern this week. I didn't take a lunch. I didn't take a break. I didn't even work out. I ate a whole bunch of junk food. I was yelling at the kids, kicking the cat, like all of those things kind of building up. So now you kind of identify for yourself, I need to make some adjustments. But self-awareness is key in being able to identify that space.
Yeah, we'll quickly normalize a lot of the things you talked about, right? The tension in your shoulders, the wringing of the hands, right? The biting of the nails, right? Like those behaviors that if you don't become self-aware, right, you make them a natural part of your day when they really are signs of.
They are the signs. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to, I don't know, and I have to make myself, I say used to, I probably still do it. Like a lot of us hold tension in our shoulders, right? Like, so it's this thing. And I would say, and then I would do this and it was like my whole body would just release it, not even being aware. And so I find myself having to just check every now and then and just do this to make sure that my shoulders are down.
Yeah.
One of the ways in which I naturally hold stress, didn't even recognize it. And then the first thing, and I think last year's show made me really start paying attention to it. What caused this, right? Not first, like just releasing it, but what's causing me to do this?
Yeah,
so
that's self-awareness.
Right? Like there's something going on in my mental well-being that's not well. And
absolutely.
So because that was hard to acknowledge and admit, this starts happening, right? Like without me even being aware of it. So I just really appreciate the gifts that you've brought over the last 2 seasons that really, if you just pick them up and try them on, they really can help make a difference. Because when we talk about mental health, again, very specifically, we're not talking about those things that are in the DSM-4, right? Like
exactly.
Yeah.
Good. Yes. Everybody has mental health, just as everybody has physical health.
Love that.
And you go annually and do your annual physical checkup because that's recommended, highly recommended. And so when do you do that mental health checkup? Yes. Excellent, Michele. That's the key. People really miss it and think that when you're talking about mental health, you're talking about mental illness, which is, there is a difference. So, yeah.
I really love that. Again, because we've normalized these kind of behaviors that can lead to some of the things you were talking about earlier, right? Constipation, vomiting, right? Like stress shows up in a very physical way.
For sure.
And if you go to your primary care physician to address the constipation, he's not asking you about your mental well-being. They're just
very rarely.
Right? So it really becomes our responsibility. I think, Crystal, last year you talked about how far can you drive a car on empty? You just can't. Right? You can't. And so at some point, you got to get the tune-up. You got to get the gas. And so if we don't think about mental illness in the same way, if we do think about it in the same way, and when I think about mental illness, I need to go see a therapist. Why do I need to see a therapist when I'm talking about mental wellness?
Well, because I guess you can look at it multiple ways. We cannot stop saying self-awareness plays a significant part on this journey. Okay. So you may not necessarily need to see a therapist weekly. You may need to do a check-in. So last year, I met with a young lady for 3 sessions, maybe 4. She had a significant experience that happened. She went to buy a motor vehicle, and in the process of buying a motor vehicle, she was robbed, and the money she had to buy the vehicle was taken from her. This is a traumatic event, right? So as a result of that, for about a month, she was having difficulty like sleeping, just crying a lot, just kind of really upset about the situation. She didn't want to go to work, and it was starting to affect her life. So she came into the therapy scene, and it took 4 times to talk her through that. 4 times to just share, for her to open up on her experience, how it was affecting her, helping her to realize she do have supports, and she was able to utilize the tools and the resources she had to support her. Never needed to come back, right? It was just a quick check-in for a serious occurrence that occurred in her life. She realized she needed help after it was becoming harder and harder for her to go to work, to interact with her children, and she was crying a lot. So that's that self-awareness. Now, if she hadn't, if the incident occurred in August, she was in therapy by October. She was done by December. But had she ignored something that significant, now it could have got so much in the way of her functioning that she's probably not working, not doing anything, because she did not realize I do have support and I can use my support and I have a community around me. But it took therapy to help her see that, because prior to that, all she was seeing was what happened to her, how unfair it was, how horrific it was, and not being able to get out of that space. So it's important because a therapist walks alongside you, just kind of help you see what's going on from a different perspective, help you make sense of your experience, and help you come up with a plan how you're going to deal with this experience. Some people need more than others. Sometimes we've been having experiences our whole life,
Right.
and they culminate in something else, and it just looked like a total like car accident in the scene, like mentally, and we kind of have a longer time in therapy. But therapy just kind of helps you see what the bigger picture is, or where you are and what happened, and you're having a good therapist to help you identify how to make sense of it in your current state or where you are currently.
So
If that makes any sense.
yeah, so our listeners out there, and Stacey, I want you to help us talk about the importance of this, right? Don't ever tell your girlfriends, don't ever tell yourself, girl, you should be over it by now. Girl, get
Oh
over it, right?
no.
Or even saying it to yourself, like that happened 6 months ago. I should be
Yeah.
over it by now. Talk to us about the danger of putting a clock on healing over a mental situation.
Yeah. Because healing is such a process. It's a journey, and it can take you 3 years to work on one situation that has been an issue your whole life, right? So, for example, if you have an individual that have been sexually molested at 6 years old, and that they've carried that all their life, and now as an adult, it's showing up in different ways. We have to go back to that 6-year-old child and work with that 6-year-old child to get her to 35 where she is right now. So it takes it takes time. It's a journey. It's a process. And I never endorse that statement. Girl, get over it. You should be over it, even towards yourself, because one of the things you want to do as we talk about self-awareness is having compassion for who we are, having self-compassion. So if you heard somebody tell you your story, would you tell them, girl, you need to be over it right now? You would be like, oh, girl, wow. You have so much compassion for them and empathy, but we minimize that towards ourselves.
Good point.
Because
Wow.
we've been conditioned to take care of everybody else
Yeah.
except us, right? But it goes
Yeah.
back to I often say I do with my financial coaching. We do a lot of financial therapy, but stuff like this comes up, and I say people don't understand why they operate the way that they operate.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
when they, you think this one thing has happened or is going on, but then when you start talking about it, it unleashes all of the other things. And so you
It
wind up
does.
to heal in those other areas as well. And I believe that
Yeah.
is part of the journey. And the journey is so important. And oftentimes we want to skip to, well, now I'm healed. You don't want to take the steps, but the steps, talk about the steps and why the steps are so important.
The steps are so important because 90%, especially like you think of our generation, 90% of us grew up in an environment where nobody talked about what your emotions were, why they were important, why you should pay attention, using language like you being able to have the opportunity to say, I feel sad and I am sad because. I'm going to speak for myself then because I didn't have that growing up. So as an adult, I had to figure out and identify that having and dealing with my emotions is okay. So it's okay to say, you know what, I'm angry right now. Because we only had two things we could do when we were growing up. You either go smile and be happy around everybody or go in the corner and deal with that. What you mad about, right? I'm gonna give you something to cry for. You don't have no reason to be mad. Like you don't have no reason to be sad. Those are the things I used to hear. And I'm pretty sure most of the people in growing up with me, because at the time you just weren't hearing those conversations. Now a lot has shifted, so our kids do have a better space to be able to express themselves for the most part, but it starts there. And that's why the steps are important to unravel that, because now you have to connect your younger self to your older self and work through all of that and bring it into alignment, right? A lot of experiences we had as children, most people didn't talk about it. You had to keep it to yourself. And then now you're expected to function as an adult, but these things still come up for you. So the steps are definitely important because you have to kind of unravel. Sometimes you have to unravel. Most people can do the work themselves. You may watch videos or journal, or you may talk to people, or you may just have an ability to be honest with yourself and be okay with it. But some people need to learn that. And once they can learn that, it makes it easier for them to unravel and to heal. So the steps definitely play an important role because it goes back sometimes a very long way.
So I want to talk about the unravel and fear, right? Like it really feels like a ball of yarn, right? And that unravel, I'm afraid of what's going to happen with the unravel, right? Like to this day, I sit here and I've never fully grieved my father's death out of fear. If I unravel that grief, you all like straitjacking me up, right? Like I hold that fear. And so I know there are portions of my life that I'm not living my greatest because I'm holding on to that grief. Like I am clear. We're going to talk about resources later. And 2 years ago, one of the resources that you offered was about grief. And I said in the large session, and I was like, yep, I know it. Still never did anything about it out of that fear. I'm always thankful for the free therapy. And talk to us about fear. And how do we overcome some of that we can go and get the help and be willing to unravel that ball of yarn?
So I would say to you, Michele, what's holding your fear in place? There's something that's holding that fear in place. So whether it's anger, whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression, whether it's grief, whether it's whatever, for something like that, there's something holding it in place. So I will use the example, and I love to use this analogy for even when I do groups or just therapy. Years ago and I don't know, I probably told y'all this because I use it all the time, but a few years ago, my porch had this weed that was growing through it, literally growing through the cement. So I would cut it every year, just kind of cut it. Eventually it was getting like so big and so strong. This little weed got so thick through the cement. So when the guy came to cut the grass, I was like, can you tell me why this thing keeps growing in here and what I need to do? And he said to me, literally, it's a part of your foundation now. So in order to get rid of this, you would have to tear up your porch to get this out. So that was like a profound moment. So I had one or two ideas, two things to do: keep cutting it or tear the porch up to get it out. But by the time, and I was renting that place, but by the time I moved, it was the most strongest weed I had ever seen in my life. Because no, a scissors wasn't even cutting it. I needed like a hedge trimmer to go out there and snap that thing apart. That's how conditions in our life look. That eventually they start small. So for example, Michele, I'm gonna use your grief scenario. You lost your dad. Whenever that happened, you ignored, you didn't really take care of the issue. So then we have that little weed. Then years have gone by, and it's still there, but now it's probably bigger because the fact that it may not have been addressed. So it may start affecting other things and start shooting through the porch. Like, so you may be easy to cry, drop of a hat. It don't take much for you to get going. And a lot of times you don't realize that the fear of not dealing with this issue is now a big root in this concrete, because now it's a part of your foundation or part of where you are in your space and growing. And so fear is a distraction, a deterrent to healing. Right. And
I really I want to unpack that a little bit more, right? I love this analogy. And either I tucked it away or it's the first time I'm hearing it. Right. So when he came to you and said, it's going to take one or two things. You're going to keep cutting this thing every year. You have to tear up the foundation to get to the root of it. Right. And so the cost of tearing up that porch, thousands of dollars. The cost of doing the hedge, $7.99, right? And so the fear, when it comes up next year, it's going to take me $7.99 in 5 minutes. I'd rather keep doing that.
Yes.
That thing over there that's going to cost me $3,000, right? Like, so there's a cost.
Yes. There's a cost involved. Yes. Literally a cost, financially, emotionally, because you can unravel trauma, unravel these experiences, and you go through this whole meltdown. One of my clients I have to work with on what we call a recovery plan, which means when she gets done with therapy, we got to put a plan in place for her to recover from the process, because the dig up is so intense for her. Everybody doesn't have that experience, but some people do. And now that you're done with this unravel, now let's go recover from it. And
I know the trigger. Like, I know the times of the year that it's going to be overwhelming for me. I would rather plan for that than to get to that found, right? Like, I very vulnerably, I say that. Out of that fear, I would rather plan for those trigger moments that I can identify when they're coming versus going to a grief counselor to help me to what's at the end of this ball of yarn. That feels, Crystal.
Yeah. And that's a lot of people.
Part of that, though, is I have this book called Buried Feelings Never Die. Right. And what it speaks to how we don't address those feelings, but they then start to show up. And Stacey, you said it in other areas, but this book specifically talks about how it shows up with your physical health. So from other sickness, illness, and disease in the body. So now you're not dealing with this thing, but then it's bringing up. So it's no longer just the thing coming through the weed coming through the porch. Now it's the, arthritis.
It's cracking the foundation. So now you see the crack in the foundation because it's so big. Because eventually that was what he said was going to happen. If you don't get it out of there, it's going to get so strong, it's going to crack the foundation.
But
that's
what
happened. All right, let's go back to talking about Mary Louise. I don't want to talk about me no more. Go ahead.
She dipped her toe into the therapy for a second, and it was like, I'm straight on that now.
Right here in my chest.
That's that self-awareness, Michele. Right? Yeah,
That is
it's
definitely
key.
that self-awareness.
Yes.
But isn't it also the thing, even when you just talk about illness, I've heard it say, and I can't remember the time, but your body will let you know that there's something wrong before a doctor can physically take a test for
Always.
it and figure that out.
Always.
So isn't that the same thing, that weed coming up or whatever the triggers are that are coming, but it's just letting you know, hey, it's the reminder. Something is
There's a well-known book in our psychological therapy world called The Body Keeps the Score. And that book, that's exactly what it talks about. Is that it's held there. It's held. And so what happened is as we age though, it shows up differently. So if you're young, you can kind of mask it, but it starts it really starts getting in the way eventually because it's there. Like I like my analogy because it helps people see what I'm trying to say. So you have a closet, you never empty it out, but you keep shoving stuff in there. 10 years from now, and I mean, you open the closet, it's coming out. It's there. You never removed it. You never took it out of there. And so it helps you to just kind of be able to work through the spaces that you find ourselves in. And grief is one of those silent ones because grief is such a lonely journey. Like nobody can understand grief until you go through it. You lose somebody you love, they're gone, and yes, people showed up with the flowers and they hugged you. And if you ever need anything, I'm there for you. And that happens, and that's nice. But you have to walk that out silently. Because after 2 years, if you still crying and you say, "Oh, I'm just thinking about the person I lost," people gonna be looking like, "I thought you was over that. You still crying?" Like they're gone. Like, they're not here. And it's uncomfortable for people because if you're in a room and you just start bust out crying and people say, "What's wrong?" And you tell them that, oh my gosh, they want to leave you. Like, okay, here's the box. I'm gonna go get you some water. I'll be right back. Like, so it's a lonely journey. And so understanding grief is significant. Dealing with grief is significant. Because that's one of those things that just don't really go anywhere undealt with, just like anything else. But that one is such a lonely space because you have your emotions wrapped to the person that you lost that nobody else has.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Even if it's a father or mother, the siblings have their own reaction. You are the only one that have this experience losing this person.
Yeah. So if I don't ask a different question, clearly y'all we're gonna get off this grief stage. All right. So our children.
Okay.
When they have a traumatic event, should we automatically take them to see someone? And when I say traumatic event, right, like I don't even want to just talk about the big things, right? Car accident, somebody breaking in your home, a death, right? Should we routinely, for the things that we don't see as a parent, take our child in to see someone before those things manifest and turn into something that then the bad child, right? Like then they get this different label because they had a traumatic experience that we did not tend to.
So if you have a kid that's having an experience like that, parents have the ability to get to their kid. It's just sometimes it's uncomfortable for parents.
But we call them resilient, Stacey, right? Like, oh, kids are resilient. They can get through, right? And there's a danger.
Yeah, but there is a danger. The resilience come when they have the support to get through what they're going through. And a lot of times parents find it easier to say, I'll put them in therapy, but I don't want to talk about the issue with them. Mm-hmm. I don't want to, it's uncomfortable for me. My kid went through something this hard. It's too painful. It's too hard for me. So let me have a therapist deal with it. But therapy is only an hour a week or an hour every 2 weeks or an hour a month. So the kid is in your home every other time. So it still is the parents having the conversation, helping to support the child with empathy, normalization, just all these different things to help support them as they navigate the journey. And I'm not saying don't do therapy. Therapy is fine, but having those still being a present force, like the best therapists are parents, especially when your kids are younger, because the kids have more of a bond with the parents. The kids will respond to the parents getting in on the situation and talking about it, normalizing it, supporting their emotions, having them have the opportunity to express what they feel. But if a kid realizes that the parent can't handle it, the kid is not going to share, because now they don't want their parent in discomfort. The kid is going to go into, oh, I don't want mom to be hurt. And then that can interpret to, I need to deal with this myself. I need to be the one to address the situation. I don't have to talk about it. I'll keep it to myself. And then you create a problem. So when you get to that point where if their issue is just uncomfortable for you as a parent, then I would suggest you do get therapy. But they're, like I said, therapy is only an hour a week. So the kid still needs an outlet to be able to talk about the issue and whatever is going on. You know, when I do trauma therapy and I do TFCBT, which is a narrative form of trauma therapy, and the kids have to write their trauma story. And most parents would often say, I know what happened. And the narrative is very detailed because the kids write it about 20 times over and over again, because what that does is it helps them kind of like plateau in this weirdness about their experience and they make sense with it. Now, prior to one of the components of this is that the kid has to read the story to the parents. But before the kid read the story to the parent, myself as a therapist, give the parent the story for them to read. Every time I've done it, parents are crying in distress because they never realize the details behind their kids' trauma. Mm-hmm. And so, because they often say, oh, no, I can't handle it. No, you can't read this. And this tells how they felt, what happened, what they smelled, what they heard, the intensity of the emotion. And that's hard for a parent to hear. So when a kid realizes that the parents can't handle it, they'll back up. 90% of the times they'll back up and they'll keep it to themselves. So it becomes harder for the parent to be able to support them in that space. And that's when therapy definitely becomes necessary, because somebody can hear it neutrally and not do, what?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right.
You tell somebody your story and they react like that, you're going to pull back.
Right.
Our kids are the same way.
Right. So in the chat, Deborah's asking, so if I decide to take my child to therapy, should it be gender specific? If I have a male child, should they see a male? If I have a...
Ask the kid what's more comfortable. Ask them what they want. Because you'll have some boys that will say, talking to a dude about my feelings is weird. Where you may have other boys that say, talking to a guy is better because they can relate. Right?
Makes sense.
So I would talk to the kid about what is it that they would prefer.
Absolutely makes sense. Thank you. Yeah. So, like, I feel really cautious about the way that I form questions. I'm feeling a little bit of kind of way, and grateful, right? Like very, very grateful to continue to be challenged, to pay attention to the things, because I know there's an impact to my health, to my mental well-being, and I can't compartmentalize it. So I'm really, really grateful to both of you for holding me in that space to acknowledge that. So again, when we talk about, right, like this space of my mental health, I don't need therapy. I got a good girlfriend. I don't need therapy. I can tell my husband everything. Yeah. I don't need therapy, ... Tell us why this checkup really is important outside of all of those people that we feel like we can fully rely on.
Because you are with you all the time. So yes, you have a good husband. Yes, you have a good girlfriend. But 100% of the time, Stacey is with Stacey. And I cannot ignore that. Like I have to live with my thoughts, my emotions, my behaviors, because they're all interconnected. Your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors are interconnected, and they're always operating, whether you know it or not, whether you acknowledge it or not, whether it's in your consciousness or not. The way you think, feel, behave are intertwined. I'm with that all the time. So I have to check myself, but you have to know yourself in order to do that. So if you have emotions that you ignore, it becomes harder for you to assess what's going on. So it's hard to put that on somebody else. They can help you with that, but it's time for us to start taking time to know ourselves, sit with our emotions, sit with ourselves, identify like if this is too big, that's where you really need to be talking about. I probably should be taking the next step to talk to somebody on a regular basis about this. Because you don't want it to get to the point where that good girlfriend starts avoiding you because here we go. Our therapy session time, but I mean, I said that in fun, but and friends don't mind, because sometimes it's okay to talk through with your girls about things you're experiencing and normalizing that. But you need to be able to know that, what, this has been happening for a while. I need to deal with this. It's not easy to look yourself in the mirror for real and really intricately examine your soul, because that's where our emotions are held. It's not easy. So when you get to that place, it takes a lot of courage to say, you need to do something about this. Yeah. And it's okay.
When you talk about talking to your girlfriends, your guys, if men are listening, or your spouse, right? They're gonna help where they can, but also sometimes they're gonna put their input based off of their own lack of healing, right? And or not being able to going to see that therapist. You get to look at it. I'm not judging. I'm not doing any of those things. I'm not standing in the middle of whatever this relationship that you have with this person that you may have this trauma with. And then you have the tools and the resources because you've been trained in order to do that.
Yeah. One of the things, Crystal, we talk about in the work that I do is intent versus impact, right? And so, right, like my good girlfriend, my significant other, they intend, right, to be doing well without being able to pay attention to the impact. And in therapy, the impact that may be happening, the therapist is the controlled environment of how to pay attention to what that impact is. So many people are well-intended, right?
Yeah.
Like, you get over it, or I thought you would be over it. Like, there was no malintent in that. You didn't pay attention to the impact that statement had, right? Like, and so it's really important. Another reason we should all pay attention to the self, right? Like, as you were talking about that self, I kept thinking about the ways, not me, somebody else I used to know.
Not you.
Would create chaos to keep from being in that space of having to do that self-evaluation, that soul, right? Create chaos to keep from doing that. And I really love how you keep challenging us to come back to, you got to do the I work. You got to do the I
Absolutely. If you ever, I don't know if you ever seen an adult in a tantrum before, and you're like, why are they behaving like that? There is absolutely a why to that. And it will take them to really examine themselves. And so when you say a person like, I don't have that problem, I don't have a problem, okay. But really, if you really take a stop, and I just know that a lot of times we grew up in spaces where we were ashamed of who we are for so many reasons, so many societal dysfunction and cultural dysfunction and family dysfunction that made those messages like hard for us to really embrace. It is okay to look at ourselves and to still love ourselves, even though we're working through our flaws and our inadequacies. And that even there's strength in being able to identify a weakness, because the word weakness doesn't mean that you're flawed and imperfect. We are all that, but it doesn't mean that there's not a part of you that's still functional and that's still worthy and that's still amazing and that's still gracious and that you have a lot to offer, even though you're working through that. And they exist together, and it's okay. But I think a lot of times the messages that we still regurgitate are rooted somewhere in our life experience, that I can't talk about that. And if I talk about that, people look at me funny. Well,
Right.
this is where you have this space that's yours to talk about it. And now I'm gonna say this cautiously: your therapist shouldn't look at you funny, but listen, you know what I mean.
Okay, that's a great lead in to someone going to see somebody, and you know what happens. That person didn't work out. And then it's that's why I won't go to a therapist, because they had a bad situation with this one.
Yeah.
How do you navigate finding the therapist for you?
So there are multiple platforms that you can explore today. So we have like Psychology Today, there's BetterHelp. Your insurance company also can provide for you resources like of all the different options you have. 99% of therapists today have websites that have their pictures, have profile. You're literally gonna have to go through and look. Because getting a therapist is like getting a specialist, right? So if your doctor refer you to a heart doctor, you really want to get the best heart doctor. You don't want just to have somebody who just doing it just to do it, but that they're intentional. And sometimes it does mean that you may have to do one visit and realize it's not okay. When I started therapy years ago, I did 2 or 3. I don't even think I did the third visit. I did the second visit and I'm like, no, this is not for me.
Right.
I will not be coming back. And you have to know what you want, what you're looking for. Most times people will say, I want somebody that looks like me in terms of like ethnicity or race, or I just want a woman, I want a male, I want somebody that specializes in this area. So knowing what you're looking for is key to help you navigate, narrow it down to what you're going to do. Most therapists offer like a consultation. So utilize that opportunity to talk with them, to listen to them and see, do you think this will be a good fit for you? Because it's so hard to find a therapist, to find the wrong one and have to start over again. So really go through some elimination processes and find for yourself what you would think would be the best fit. And even hopefully you have a therapist that would say to you, I don't think I can work with you, but I can refer you to someone, or let me help you find somebody that will be suitable for you.
That's really great advice, Stacey. And it doesn't mean that you should stop trying.
Yeah.
Right? Like you kissed a few frogs along your way to get the right job you wanted, to the right spouse. Be willing
Absolutely.
to kiss frogs if you have to in this space. And there really are amazing therapists out there. All right. Like, I really appreciate you acknowledging, Stacey, right? Like for my child, therapy doesn't have to be the first response, right? Like there's some therapists that say, bring them because I charge by the hour. So I really appreciate the authenticity that you bring to these conversations every year. A good therapist should absolutely say, I cannot work with you, or I brought you as far.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
Like last time I was in therapy, when she recognized that grief was the thing that was holding me captive, she was like, I'm not, right? Like that's not my specialty. And I can make referrals to you. So I really appreciate you continuing to hold up the name of therapy in a way that invites us in and does not push us away. And so as I say,
she gave you a referral. She gave.
We're not talking about me.
Okay.
Right, like fastest hour of your day, folks. Here we are. And I wanted to talk before we run out of time. I want to talk about resources. And before we go completely there, right, when we talk about amazing women, every week, Stacey, I acknowledge Crystal's obedience to the call that she put on her life, that God has put
Yes.
on her life. I want to share that space with you today, because when I think about the resource that you're about to share, you didn't have all of the answers. You didn't have it all figured out, but you knew that there was something your community needed, and you brought it to the people, right? And you trusted him to give you what you needed to make it so. So I thank you for being obedient to the call that God has put on your life to be a service to your community. And so talk to us about this resource that will be that is coming up quickly. I want to first talk about your why. Why did you do this? And what keeps you doing it year after year after year?
Okay. So the why was when I understood the fact that we were just coming out of the pandemic, and the numbers that were, the statistical numbers were just like astronomical. I even realized how much of a role I played in this, not dealing with a mental health piece. Like we have to talk about this, because what happened is most people don't do anything until they're in a crisis. And so when we talk about mental health awareness, it's having that conversation that brings to you that knowledge that you need. So if and when you find yourself in a state of crisis, you know exactly what to do. That was the why, is we need to increase awareness. And that awareness will drive the fact that when that time comes, if that time comes, you know what to do, where to go, who you could call on. And that's the focus of bringing My Mental Health is My Business to the community.
So before we talk about this year specifically, tell us why the name.
Because again, Michele, it goes back to this. My mental health, mine, is really it's a priority, and it's my focus. No different than my physical health. So I have to really own this part of who I am. And a lot of times people separate it. They separate their mental state from everything else. We know how to function. We know how to do everything else. But what is your state of mind as you're doing everything else? And that's the whole conversation, is that your mental health is your priority. It should be your priority. It's your business. It's your focus. Like we like to be in everybody else's business. We like to scroll and see people's reels and see their cover shots and their this and their that. Now let's put the screen on us and make this a priority. And it's not in a negative. It really is for us to really become normal, saying, and when I journal today, I realized that this wasn't right and I need to do something about it.
I love it.
So that's the focus.
So tell us about this year's event that is coming up this Saturday.
Yes, it's coming up this Saturday. One of the things about My Mental Health is My Business, this community event, is the first thing, it's free. Because I did not want any barriers in place to people getting these resources. And we know that finances become a barrier a lot of times to people being able to be their best. So I didn't want that to be an issue. So this is a free community event. So first, I want to thank our partner, our community champions on the companies and the businesses that stood in the gap to make this free, stepping in and saying, we want to support this so that everybody can come. This is for the entire family. We have a section for our teens and our youth. They have their own keynote speaker, which will have conversation with them about how they can start making their mental health a priority. Our keynote speaker for the adults is going to be Dr. Sabrina Jackson, which is our Detroit native, who is going to come in and have that conversation with us about making our mental health a priority. We have wellness events, wellness activities for the entire family and the community. So we're going to have fitness. Shout out to Agency Fitness. It's going to be in the driving seat with that moment for us. We're going to have meditation. We're going to have yoga. We're going to have chair massages, mini facials, art therapy. We're going to have some pet therapy. So the pets come in and show how they can provide comfort to us. We're going to have resources. So right now we have about 50 vendors and community resources and wellness partners that are coming together for these 4 hours to make this experience worthwhile. When you leave that day, you should walk away with resources of where you can go, what you can do, how you can do it, when you can do it, and to help increase that awareness of taking care of your mental health. That is what that day is all about.
Do I have
It's
to be
next
in
week,
crisis?
Saturday.
Do I have to be in crisis?
Absolutely not. No, because mental health is everybody has a mental health component of their life. Just like our physical health, our mental state is important. If you're in crisis, come. But if you're not in crisis, come. So that when you are in crisis, you know what to do, where to go, who to call. Yes.
Thank you, Stacey. This is going to be an amazing event for
Amazing.
everyone to attend. So get there, bring your children, bring your spouse, bring your girlfriends,
Yes.
bring your boyfriends, bring your husband,
Bring your neighbor.
all of that. Here's an opportunity to get some access to some resources from some amazing folks for free. Shame on you if you don't make this a priority, because we all need the resources. There's nothing worse than waiting till crisis to try to figure out what to do. They're telling us all, right? Like, have water on hand, have enough food to be able to feed your family, get ready for, don't wait until. Here's another opportunity to get a resource that's really going to help. Stacey in the chat, Sonia says, thank you for explaining the difference between mental illness and mental health.
Absolutely.
You continue to bring information every year that allows us to think about the importance of making our mental health our business. And I'm so very grateful to be able to have this conversation with you year after year. So very grateful to be able to call you my friend, my sister in Christ. Can't wait till Saturday and look forward to the gems that you drop a year from now. Crystal.
Thank you. If you, I did drop the link to register for the event in the chat. I remember the very first event, and I came because it was you guys, right? Michele was the keynote speaker, and I came because it was you. And after the event, I remember posting on social media about the event and saying, it was the place I didn't know I needed to be, right?
Yeah.
Because we think we're good. We're handling the things, but you learn so much stuff that you never would think about until you sat in the space. So yeah, I encourage you guys to come. I'm definitely excited to be one of the vendors this year.
Absolutely, bringing us some financial resources and the connection. We're so interconnected, like as a being, and a lot of times we just miss that everything goes together.
Everything goes together, everything. So again, I thank you for doing what you do, for being obedient to your calling. It's absolutely to see the passion that you have when you talk about it, right? It just lets you know that this isn't something that you just do. It is who you are. And those of you all that are looking for a therapist, here is a great one for you. Tell them, how can we get in touch with you? If they need to get in touch with you after they come to the event, they'll have lots of.
They'll have it there,
but for those who cannot make it to the events,
yes,
how can we get in touch with you?
The easiest way is my website. So that's www.therestorationvillage.com. Simple. All my connections are through that portal. You'll see the Instagram, the Facebook, the phone number, the email. That's really where the hub is, and you can connect with me there. And I promise you, if I can't help you, I will help you find somebody that can help you as you navigate your journey.
Yeah.
Stacey, and I know this is going to take us away, but in 30 seconds, 45 seconds, can you tell us Is virtual therapy as effective? Can it be effective? Is it an option that we should take? Talk to us briefly about.
Yeah. It's very effective. Because it's almost like you're in the office, but you're just looking through a camera. I find me personally as a therapist, because I am only in the virtual space, being able to connect with my clients through virtual therapy, even with kids. Like, you have that opportunity. The important, what virtual therapy does is it minimizes the barrier. Like, I have a client all the way in Bear Lake, Michigan, right? In the UP,
Okay.
because it helps them to find a resource that is available to them, and they don't have to drive 4 hours every week to come for therapy. They
Awesome.
can do it in their living room and connect.
I really wanted to make sure that we got that out there for folks who
Yes.
have been wondering. Chris,
Yes.
I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Stacey, for continuing to do this to our listeners. I
Thank
hope
you for having me. I really enjoy coming and chatting up with you ladies.
it's always good, and the information is always on point and so useful. And I think, that's part of what we try to do when you deliver every single time. And the analogies that you always come up with really and truly help people put things in a different perspective and see, why taking care of
Yeah.
yourself mentally is so very important. So I absolutely thank you for that. To the people who are tuning in, listen, it's so much going on in the world today. Like, there's
So
so
much. Yeah.
much going on in the world today,
Moment by moment. Yeah.
and there's more coming. So not only does seeing a therapist help you with the things that are going on with you from your past, whatever has just happened to you, whatever that trauma is that you may have, but it's also going to help you to cope with all of this madness that's happening in the world. The
Yeah.
madness is running rampant right now. So again, Stacey, I thank you for being as awesome as you are. Michele, what can I say? Couldn't do this without you. Wouldn't dream of doing this without you. And call the, you know, uh, make the call. Yeah, make the call. And you probably need to give me the number after you make the call, because we sit in that one together. So thank you both. I am Crystal Gunn. I am a Black woman, and I absolutely own my amazing.
Yes,
Chill.
you do. Crystal, again, I said it about Stacey. I won't let another session go by, another week go by without saying it to you. Your obedience is changing the game for all of us, for women
Thank
who have
you.
never physically shared space with you. You, my friend, are a blessing to so many, and I'm grateful to share this platform with you every single week. Could not
Thank you.
imagine without some other crisis or barrier not being here to have these conversations with you. Stacey, I will not look at a weed in a crack of a sidewalk the same ever.
Ever.
Again, thank you for the gems that you brought. I got better tonight. Even if I'm
Thank you.
not particular healing, I got better tonight. So I thank you for that. My name is Michele Harper. I am a Black woman, and without apology, even with my grief, I own my amazing
Yes, you
Stacey.
do.
Ladies, thank you so much for creating space for this conversation and allowing me to just really operate in my authenticity, because I've had to walk the journey that I talk about. So I just want to say good evening to everybody. My name is Stacey Williams. I am a Black woman, and I proudly and courageously own my amazing. Thank you.
I absolutely love it. Thank you so much. Please, everybody, find Amazing Women Speak on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Spotify. And whatever your favorite platform, please like, subscribe, and turn notifications on. Take a look at past episodes. I promise you, you will find more than one that will speak to your soul. Watch it, dig in, and then after that, share them with someone else so that you can help them own, honor, and execute their amazing as well. Thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you to those who come on and just listen, and for those who drop nuggets and questions in the comments every single week. Join us next week when our topic will be boundaries of demand? Are
Oh,
we
wow.
pushing limits or are we pushing people away? That's going
Wow.
to be a
Deep.
good one in a world where we need to set more boundaries. So I thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night, everybody.
Good night.